Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Sales Manager Academy. I'm your guest, or really your host, Omar. Uh, I'm glad to have you guys on the show as a guest. Today, here, let me add this on here. All right. So today, want to talk a little bit about obviously the leadership game. We're talking things that make sense, things that don't make sense, things that work, things that don't work. Because when it comes to, being a leader that doesn't have a direction, that doesn't have anybody who's actually leading them, uh, it's it's tough to make some calls. It's tough to know where you're at, what you're standing for, if you're heading in the right direction or not. Some leaders are really good at letting you know, like, hey, you're fucking up, right? Let's correct course. Um, and they give you that feeling that you have the authority to actually be able to make that change, make that decision. And others, they jam down your throat, um, cussing you out, cussing up a storm, thinking that that's being helpful, uh, and expecting you to pretty much roll the shit down the hill so that everybody understands that you went through this, so they got to go through it. And that's not the right kind of leadership to have, right? I mean, listen, I've worked in the trades, I got family in the trades, I get how it is. And even then, right, this isn't the trades, this is sales. And in the fucking trades, like certain, like you don't become better by being cussed at and thinking that's going to make you see things differently, or being yelled at because you don't know how to do something that somebody else knows how to do, and they're not taking the time to teach you that. And oftentimes, this happens a lot when there's leadership that doesn't know how to train and develop others. They expect that the individuals they bring on board are going to figure it out on their own without any kind of support, without any kind of resources, yet they forget that they themselves had some kind of resource, had some kind of support that allowed them the room to be able to grow and develop. And that's where a lot of people don't understand that. Um, and it becomes difficult for them to try to change because they don't want to change in a sense because they think that what got them there is the exact same thing that's going to make them successful in that role. And the thing is, guys, when you jump from one role to another role, you have to bring some change. There is going to be change in duties, there's going to be change in, um, not just responsibilities, but also who you're leading, right? Because you go from being a, individual contributor, an individual that's just selling on the floor, to being somebody that's now in charge of a group of people, to being somebody that's in charge of a district, a territory, an area. And that means that you have to change that kind of thought process that you have over how to do things and how people respond to certain things. Okay. And as you go up, there's a lot more change because you yourself are not directly involved with a lot of it. So you have to understand where you're going to be most impactful, what kind of change and what kind of directives are going to work best for everybody, as opposed to, just barking orders and expecting people to jump whenever you say jump. It doesn't work that way, right? You yourself do not have that direct impact. Um, and if you say, well, I'll just cut their hours, I won't have them work. Okay, cool. What happens when your entire team decides, you know what, we're just not going to be here. We're not going to produce. We're not going to show up, right? They could be there. It doesn't mean that they're going to show up in performance. That affects you at a greater level because now your leadership is, coming into question. And listen, I've been there. I've actually had one of my best stores do a walkout. And it was over pay plan changes, and it wasn't anything I can control, right? This store produced a good number, right? It's a store that I took from producing about 300, 400 opportunities a month, 300 to 400 units a month, right? To almost doubling it to about 700 units on average. So it was a pretty big store for the entire company, right? Especially once I took over the area. And I had caught wind, right? My teams had actually let me know because I was able to get all the teams to kind of communicate with each other, make sure everybody had open communications. And it was some of the other stores that were reaching out to me, and the store manager had also told me like, hey, I think something might happen on this day. They're not happy about it. And I was like, okay, well, I hope they don't. There's nothing I can do if they decide to do that. It's not like we can make a change to the pay plan right now. It's already been decided. There's channels for us to be able to voice our concerns. So let's see what happens, right? Uh, and I was like, all right. So obviously let my leadership know, like, hey, I think something's going to happen. Just FYI. So like, okay, get it handled. Just make sure you got it under wraps. And lo and behold, it did happen. Not everybody decided to walk out. Um, but the thing is that it was really just that store. And the rest of my team for the district stepped up and said, hey, you know what? We get it. We don't think it's right. You're not responsible for pay plan changes. That's above your pay grade. So we get that. Um, they stepped up. And what ended up happening next kind of surprised me and surprised everybody else. Uh, so I stepped in to assist as much as I could. The rest of my team that stepped up in the district, we spread each other thin, right? Obviously, now we have less because that store accounted for about half of my staffing for the entire district. Uh, and we ended up producing more out of that store with half the number of employees uh, for the day, right? Everybody came back like normal. I didn't write up anybody. Uh, we had a discussion, right? Team discussion over everything, and then also district discussion, and let everybody know, like, hey, there's channels to this. I get it. You guys aren't happy. I could have written everybody up. I'm not going to do anything like that because you guys have obvious concerns. Whenever your guys' pay plan changes, my pay plan changes as well. So if you think you guys aren't happy with some, changes being constants, guess what? I'm not happy with it either. We just got to go with the flow. This is the industry that we're in. This is how they've changed their pay plan. It's not that the company is changing their pay plan. It's that it was AT&T at that time. It was that AT&T is changing the way they're compensating us on the back end. So we have to align with wherever they're saying the money's going to be going. And that's what we have to focus on, right? So we can be unhappy as much as we want, and that's fine. We can either let that rule the day, or we can decide, you know what, I'm not happy with it. What can I do to make sure I'm still where I'm at before? Because change is going to be constant. Change is going to happen in our industry. It's technology, it's services, it's what we live for. I've been in the industry since before 2010. This is like years after that. And I told him, I was like, hey, I've been in the industry since before 2010. I've seen the changes. I remember when the first iPhone still launched and we didn't get paid on the iPhone. We lost money on the iPhone. Like that's what it is. Um, so you betcha I didn't sell the iPhone, or you betcha that a bunch of us talked people out of the iPhone into flip phones because that's paid the most, or QWERTY keyboard phones, right? Anything but a smartphone. Um, so obviously things are going to change. You have to have the conversation. You have to be open, right? And you have to let your team know that they have an avenue to be able to voice their concerns, and it's not a brick wall where it's not going to go anywhere, right? These are suggestions, things that can hopefully make things better, or things that will affect others in ways that they just don't want to be affected. It happens, right? But you can't let shit roll down the creek, roll down the hill, because you betcha one of the vice presidents of the company and the executives, they were fucking livid. Uh, when they heard that this was going to be happening, uh, right? Team came back, right? Everybody took a little bit because obviously you can't do that and then expect things to be super, super joyous for the people that did it, right? Because they're still want to make sure that they felt heard, and they got to have a little bit of, you know, voicing their concerns. So that's where obviously I had my executive team come. So one of the regional directors came, heard them out, right? This store specifically, and then obviously we went with the rest of the district. But it's those things where like, hey guys, we're not gatekeeping. And as a leader, you have to make sure your team understands that you're not gatekeeping change, you're not gatekeeping success from them, um, that you're wanting to pursue what change can occur. You're wanting to pursue success for them and for everybody involved. And that happens through showcasing training and development by helping people elevate themselves to a different platform. Uh, because oftentimes when somebody thinks they're not ready for something, it means that they probably are. If somebody else is telling them like, hey, you should roll into this position, you should apply for this position, you should try doing this, right? It means that you have something to showcase that they're seeing that you yourself won't see. And I say that from personal experience. I turned down a district manager role 3 times before one of the VPs was like, you're gonna fucking take this role whether you like it or not. um, Only because I felt I hadn't earned it, even though I had created recruiting SOPs for the entire company, even though I had created the ATS system that the company had been using, even though I helped recruit for, regional director levels, for district manager levels, for store manager positions, even though I can go into a territory and turn performance around, and the fucking field loved me for that, right? When I was a recruiter, but I myself could not see it as I earned the DM role, even though everything I had been doing, had showcased, had proved otherwise, right? Don't put yourself in that position where you're not taking that leap of faith that somebody else is seeing in you. Um, because you'd be surprised at what you could do. You'd be surprised at what your team can do as well. They have to be able to see that. And sometimes they want to jump into a role where they're definitely not ready because they're missing certain skill sets. Specifically, your top sellers are probably some of the most prime people that want to go into leadership, not because they want to lead people, but because that's where it pays more money, because they're capped out at a certain position. And I get it, right? However, when you push those people, worse when you push them in without them wanting to go into that role, that becomes even worse because now they're disgruntled. They do not want to be responsible for other people's performance. They cannot fathom why people are not doing things the way they're doing it when they themselves aren't teaching others, aren't developing others in learning how to do it that way so that they can potentially produce more or do more with their time. Um, so that's where you have a double-edged sword because when you force them into that role, they're going to be super livid that they're not responsible for this. A small percentage of them, they'll come up to the occasion and they'll do it. Others are just going to look for a way out because you know what? You're blowing me up. I'm not responsible for this person's performance. I didn't want to be here. You forced me into this role, right? You figure it out. Um, and that's where being a leader is very important. You want to have a pipeline of individuals that you've been training up to be able to take this, to go into these roles, not just in your territory, but potentially in any other territory. They have more ability, especially when they're younger or they're willing to relocate and they don't have to think about it. Boom, that's a lot of opportunity for them, right? Because that also means whether they stay within the organization or not, they have areas or places they can go. They have opportunity for growth that they're not going to have anywhere else. And that means a lot to people, whether they know it at first or not. They won't see that sometimes until later down the road. And that's perfectly fine. As a leader, there's a lot of work that you're going to do that you're going to do without recognition. Your team should get all the praise whenever performance is great, right? And if somebody comes to you as a leader and like your team's rocking it, you're doing great. Okay, cool. Give your team the accolades they deserve, right? Because you just showed them, you just guided them, mentored them. They're the ones executing. Okay. Uh, that's a big one. And if you consistently do that across different territories, right? Different stores, different markets, different territories, districts, areas, whatever you want to call it, that's where you start seeing a pattern of recognition of what can be done. I've known this about myself for the longest time. I am, uh, I thrive in chaos when it comes to leadership, meaning that I can turn things around. I am the kind of leader that you bring in when you want to turn things around. If you want the status quo, I am not. That is not me. I don't like being the status quo guy. I have met leaders that are the status quo person, and there's nothing wrong with it. There's a different type of leadership mindset that you have to have depending on what you're looking for. Okay. A status quo person is somebody who can maintain the level and keep it steady. They're still increasing, right, steadily, but they're maintaining what's happening so that you don't have to worry about, okay, is this going to drag? Is this going to go down? Once you get an area to a certain level, you want to have somebody who can maintain it because there is no real room for growth, right? You got to maintain what's happening. So you train them up and they just maintain it. And then that means that you can move to different territory that could potentially use more assistance, more help, right? Where they need to get better aligned with, you know, hitting targets or certain KPIs, with better recruiting, better interviewing processes, because everything's aligned. Everything, you cannot have great performers and have consistent selling teams that are overtly always performing consistently without having a good hiring and interviewing process. Okay. Because then you end up churning through a lot if you don't have something set up. And that means that your teams are not going to be very consistent because you're having to constantly change people around. Uh, that's the hardest thing for a lot of people. And in certain industries, right, retail is known for this, especially smaller retail locations. Believe it or not, small mom and pop shops typically have better longevity with employees because they have more of a say and they get to try things out a little bit more, especially, with the owners being involved, because they're typically owner operators than with larger companies, right? Larger companies have a lot more boomerang employees because they're constantly having to hire people and people will constantly leave. I've seen companies where people are fired or employees will literally just walk off the floor and get rehired at a different location because they've known those managers. So they just override whatever, excuse or reason was in the books. Obviously, minus anything having to do with like AP or LP, right? Loss prevention or whatever they call those, right? Uh, Asset protection, AP. Uh, but outside of that, like, okay, they'll just keep bringing them back because they can't find quality people. It's not that they can't find quality people. They refuse to take the time to train and develop people. And oftentimes because they're already understaffed. So you got to find time. You can't use the excuse of, I constantly don't have time because I'm caught up with everything else. Because at that point, you're taking everything on you, putting it on your shoulders, instead of doing what you're supposed to be doing, which is delegating to develop and train other people to do what you are doing. As a leader, your goal is to train and develop your replacements. As store managers, the goal should be for them to train and develop their replacements. Because at that point, yeah, they're not going to necessarily replace you or that leader. But when it arises and there's an opportunity, you have people already in line. Yes, you can interview outside people, but if you're hiring mostly external employees for management levels instead of hiring from within, you're losing a lot of tribal knowledge that those individuals do not have that your employees do have on how certain processes actually work, right? Because you have an SOP, I guarantee, uh, or you may have a process that you think works and is in line already, but the process is broken, right? If people follow that process, it gets nowhere and you get more upset customers, upset clients, because the process is broken. But really, what they need to do is they go through the back channels, which new managers, new employees won't know. But your existing employees that have been around for a while, they know how it works. They know how, uh, you know, how things are actually ran, who to talk to get things pushed through. That's a big one. Tribal knowledge is something that a lot of companies, I think, take for granted, not understanding that, hey, this is how we actually get things done to make sure that we retain what we've sold. Because the name of the game isn't selling, the name of the game is retention. It's all based off what gets retained. In an industry like wireless, where it's really a service-based industry, they sell product, okay, but that's a secondary product. Their primary focus is services. So the name of the game is retention. because they're responsible for those accounts for typically the first 6 months because the way they get paid out. Most service providers, not just in the wireless industry, this is services in general, insurances, things like that. They typically pay out either every single month, right? So you get your residual check that way, or they pay a lump sum upfront. With insurance companies, for instance, they'll pay anywhere from 6 to 12 months upfront, and then they'll pay a renewal every year on the anniversary. With wireless industries, it's typically the same thing. They pay a certain percent upfront, right, over what they earn for that customer or that account for the year, and that's how the wireless dealers get paid. And that's how they have the funds to be able to run business, maintain real estate, fund employees, right? Hire employees. When I say fund, you're talking about all the stuff on the back end because it's a business. There's a lot of things on the back end that a lot of people don't understand and they don't care to understand. Okay. But the name of the game is retention. It's not about what you sell, it's about what stays on the books. It doesn't matter if you sell 1,000 units 1 month, if only 100 of those units are retained 2 months down the road. That just means everything is lost, right? It seemed like it was great, but all of a sudden there's a lot of money missing. It's all about retention. And obviously they could have canceled for a number of reasons. They went to a different carrier, it was fraud. Uh, they stopped paying the bills, whatever the case is. That's why it's super important to make sure that you have trained and developed teams so that they understand what they're actually doing, what they're looking for. And customers prefer to have somebody who's trained and developed. Training and developed doesn't mean that you know everything. It means that you're confident in the products and services that you're offering. And if you don't know something, you're confident in asking questions and letting people know that, hey, I don't know this per se, but I can help find the response. I can help find an answer. That's a big thing. And not a lot of people know that. Not a lot of people understand that aspect of things, right? When it comes to customer relationships, client relationships, uh, the relationships employees have with the own company, right? Because when an employee is just adamant that they're just not going to ask leadership, they're not going to ask for assistance because the way leadership responds or the way the company responds to them asking questions, that's a bad thing. If your people aren't asking questions, especially at the beginning, there's room to ask what is going on because they don't feel confident in bringing things up. So there's a lot that they're not grasping. There's a lot that they're not retaining. That means that there's a lot of law. That means, I'm sorry, got a little tongue tied. That means that there is a lot of lost opportunity that is walking out that door. That is never going to come back to your location because the people don't know what they're talking about. That's a huge thing. I've seen it. I've done AV sales. I've talked about this. I've done, premium appliance, luxury appliances, where you're selling, 40, 50, $60,000 um, package. And if somebody's going to spend that much money, they need to know that you have some understanding of what the hell you're doing. Uh, Unless their, contractor told them get these items specifically, right? Unless they have a bill of material, a BOM of what they need exactly from you, and they're just giving it to you. There are questions to ask. There are things that need to be understood, right? And clarified to make sure we're getting the same thing. Because even with stuff like that, it's about retention. Because if I saw a $60,000 kitchen package, I expect that not to come back because the measurements were wrong. It's things like that that you need to be open about and that people need to know. When it comes to, wireless cells, when you're talking about plans, packages, stuff like that, it's very simple and easy. But when you start asking more probing questions, that's where more opportunities will start to arise. Customers are going to want to come back to you because you're more confident, you're more knowledgeable in the material. Doesn't mean you know everything, but you're knowledgeable enough to know what you do know. And when you don't know something, you're not bullshitting, you're bringing people in. Like that's a big one. That's, I think, a hard one for a lot of people to get at first. And I get it, right? But just like I said at the beginning, When it comes to leadership, if all you're doing is just berating your team, you're not giving them the opportunity to actually ask questions. You're making them feel stupid. You're not getting anywhere with your team. You're not doing anything. You're not being a leader. You're not helping anybody step up. You're not stepping up for your team. So why should they step up and show up for you? You gotta do more than think of, okay, me being a leader is just me barking orders at people because that's what my leadership does. No, there's different ways to go about it. There is no old mindsets of how we're going to do things, that we're going to do things old school way. And if they just don't do it, they're kick rocks, right? That's not how things work. You would be surprised. I've talked about this before in different episodes where it's not necessarily money that keeps people from joining certain industries or certain companies, right? Because, hey, if fast food restaurants can hire people at the wages that they hire, most wireless carriers or companies pay typically between like 12 to $18 starting off plus commission, meaning most of these people can earn 40 to $60,000 within the first year or two. Working, no more than 40 hours. Typically it's between 35 to 40 hours a week, right? 2 days off, air conditioned majority of the time. There are obviously some events that you'll do outside of the location, stuff like that, that can be lucrative. Uh, but there's different opportunities. And that's where a lot of people don't understand, don't see. Okay. Um, and it's very, very difficult. So you have to understand what you offer, how you offer it as a leader to your team, and to ensure that you're actually being a leader because that's what your team needs. That's what your people need. That's how you're going to get them to want to actually not just perform, not just show up, but that's how you're going to want them to end up sticking around to be able to grow with the organization. And when you have people looking to move, right, and you have a lot of trouble keeping people to move up into leadership roles, that's not a question of we just don't have the right talent. If you have employees that have been with you for minimum 2 years, you have good potential for some level of leadership. The question then becomes, what are we doing wrong in training and developing people that we do not want to hire our own people into these leadership roles and prefer to go out and do external hires? That's where things become more difficult. That's where things, and I'm not saying, external hires are bad for leadership roles because sometimes you do need that different mindset. But for the majority of the time, you should have a great lineup within the company to be able to hire people into leadership roles where you should never go externally, or like 90% of the time, you should never go externally for these roles. It just, a little food for thought there. Because once again, right, like this book, Driving Loyalty. Um, it's a great talking point. If you guys haven't heard it, if you guys haven't read it, take a look into it. It's the enterprise story and how they, pretty much the enterprise model and how they run their business, which I'm a complete fan of. Don't get me wrong. I know people are going to be like, "What do you mean never hire external managers into leadership roles?" I'm not saying that, um, but you do have higher success rates when your employees are internal and they, at the very minimum, have a good understanding of what the field does, right? Because especially a lot of the corporate positions for the companies, when they hire externally, sometimes they really don't understand what's happening in the field, what the field's responsible for, unless it's somebody who comes from a very similar industry. Uh, you're still going to want them to spend some time in the field to get a better understanding. I've been there. I've seen it, right? uh, but I'll leave it at that, right? Like I said, make sure you're not letting shit roll down the hill. Stop it, prevent it, be the positivity that your team needs. Being positive doesn't mean that you're, you know, sunshine and rainbows all the freaking time. It means that you're being real without needing to, go down a certain path. It means that you're helping your team find and pivot different directions that can yield different results. That's what it means. Okay. 80-20 rule, 20% of the time, focus on the problem. 80% of the time is focused, or percent of the energy is focused on the energy of trying to solve the issue, right? That's where you want to focus on. Don't focus all your attention and time on the problem and then spend very little time trying to find a solution. Understand and acknowledge that there's an issue and spend the majority of the time and energy focusing on finding a solution. You're going to find and move faster in that direction, something that's going to work best for you, for your organization, for your team, whatever it is. Okay. So I'll leave it at that. If you guys have any questions, like I said, I always say anyway, feel free, shoot me a DM, let me know, leave a comment, right, on any of the videos, or feel free, just message me. And don't forget, hit that like and subscribe button to follow for more. And I'll catch you on the next one.